who grew up with strict parents, what was their most unreasonable rule? Story 1. Have a friend who isn't allowed to go out if he's already had too much fun this weekend. That's the only reason. They think he'll become corrupted if he has too much fun and that he won't know how to work. He's in college. Story 2. I was not allowed to talk to boys. One Christmas Eve day, I was doing last-minute shopping in the downtown of our little town. I ran into 2 male friends from my German class, and we talked for several minutes and wished each other a Merry Christmas. I was 15 at the time. My older sister drove by and saw me, told my parents I was hanging out with boys. When I walked in the house, both my parents were waiting, and the yelling began. Some Christmas Eve. Story 3. I had a ton. I think the most unreasonable was that my siblings and I weren't allowed to know where we were going during car rides. If we had asked, we were told business, and figured out we were going to the store, etc. Only after we arrived to our destination. This lasted until I moved out. Another was asking for permission to use the bathroom every time. This didn't last as long. Story 4. I changed my mind. I guess my parents weren't so bad at it. Wow. Went for a hike today, out of cell service, and returned to 9K karma and 30 comments. Since a couple people asked what I was going to say, it sounds pretty lame now compared to the rest of this thread, but it'll explain a few. We weren't allowed to swim in rivers. We were rarely allowed to go to friends' houses unless the parents knew each other. We weren't allowed to go anywhere on our own until we could drive, which was 18 for me. And just the usual strict parent pushing to get all as. Story 5. No trends or passing fads. Pokemon, banned. Barbies, banned. Beanie Babies, banned. PlayStation Game Boys, banned. Anything particularly fashionable or popular regardless of actual merit was met with derision and would be mocked for even suggesting interest. We were achingly frumpy kids with interests and cultural references, or lack thereof, that isolated us from our peers, and they wondered why each of us were bullied. Story 6. My parents were slack. My best friend's parents were so strict. She would escape to my house for freedom. 12th grade prom. Her parents allowed her to go to prom, but said she wasn't allowed to dance. We all went to prom, had fun dancing, until she saw her parents standing at the back watching. She then moved out for university. After her first year, she came home to work for the summer. She had been on her own for a year and supporting herself, and her parents gave her a 9 p.m. curfew. She spent a lot of time at my house that summer. She was married by the next summer and didn't have to deal with it. Edit. This is a small selection of the intense upbringing my friend went through, tiny even. Story 7. I had a friend who wasn't allowed to sit on the couch. No matter the circumstances, that was the first time I realized something was really wrong in his house. The kicker, it was a crappy couch, so it's not like he was going to ruin it. Edit. Responding to a gazillion people at once. To the folks looking for logic, you'll find none. No, the parents weren't saving the couch for company. No, the kids didn't have a history of damaging the couch. No, the kids weren't little troublemakers. They were surprisingly well-behaved teens, surprising because of how they were raised. This is about control, not logic. Domestic abuse is always about exerting control. Don't let anyone try to convince you otherwise. Even after adding a note about child abuse, I'm still getting jokes about how my friend must be a dog. Thanks, Reddit. Story 8. Dad was a narcissist. Biggest rule in the house was not to make any noise around him. If he was home, the whole house got quiet and tense. Even my mom used to eat her cereal in the bedroom because she'd get in trouble for chewing crunchy food. Now she's long rid of him and married to a way better guy, but she still apologizes for eating crackers. Story 9. I wasn't allowed to shrug or say, I don't know if anything tech-related went wrong. It was assumed that I broke it on purpose. Even if the only reason anyone knew it was broken is because I was trying to fix it. Birthday parties were a no-go. Christmas was a no-go. Any party whatsoever was a no-go. Story 10. I have too many to name growing up in an Asian household, but the one that was the most embarrassing was I was not allowed to shave my legs or armpits, and I hit puberty in early age. So I had really hairy armpits and legs and was forced to wear shorts to gym class. I was so embarrassed about my legs that I would wear shorts with opaque pantyhose, which just made the whole situation worse, and was the butt of many jokes in middle school. My mom has apologized thousands of times since, but it still brings back crappy memories. Story 11. Was forced to drop out of school in the 5th grade because my grandmother believed that most people have no souls and were demon-possessed. She said that the world was unsafe to roam freely because Satan was trying to corrupt God's children. This led to a very sheltered life and very silly things like having to pray over every individual item that entered the house. Food, toiletries, dish soap, you name it, ID. Get woken up at 2 a.m. to be screamed at for 3 hours over something God had told her that I did wrong. So yeah, I guess the most unreasonable rule I grew up with was not being allowed to leave the house. Edit. Okay, I get it. Apparently my life was Binding of Isaac storyline. Story 12. There were a lot. but the most ridiculous one to me was they didn't want me volunteering during high school. I was visiting the elderly, and they said it was too dangerous to be around strangers like that, and the time was taken away from my studies. Most extracurriculars I wanted to do they had a huge problem with, but it didn't hit me how absurd it was until it was about senior citizens. Story 13, my mom was insanely controlling about food. Weird rules were in place like 1 slice of lunch meat per sandwich. No one but her was allowed to cook. She'd make 1 giant batch of spaghetti or something and would have leftovers for days, so she only had to make dinner twice a week. She did not work or anything, just didn't like cooking every day. Breakfast was cold cereal, and you'd only be allowed a small bowl with just enough milk to moisten it. Occasionally she'd bake something she called corn toasties, which was simply cornbread baked in a sheet pan. She'd cut them into squares and fill the freezer with them, and we could have one of those for breakfast as an alternative. Once when I was 14, I bought a pack of hot dogs at the store, snuck them home, and lit the grill. I was almost done cooking them when she came out screaming about fire hazards and swatted the plate out of my hand. She had been making spaghetti. What an ungrateful little I was. So then she orders a pizza for the rest of my family, wraps individual servings of spaghetti in freezer paper, and puts them away. She tells me that I will be eating nothing else until it's all gone. Took about 2 months to choke it all down. Went without eating a lot of days. I was also grounded for over a year, but I sure learned a lot about consequences. Story 14, females of the family must cook and clean on holidays while males watch TV. Must bust males' plates every night. No visiting friends, houses no friends over at our house all the way through high school. Hair cannot be cut at or above shoulder. 7 o'clock p.m. bedtime. Not curfew, bedtime. Through junior high, strictly enforced. Needless to say, I rebelled strong and hard. Story 15, my parents were pretty slack on everything except one thing: no video games console ever. And no online games on the computer because that's how you get virus and make the computer run slow. So I was playing my MMORPG when they were sleeping, in a hidden file, in a file, in another file, in another file, and I was changing the appearance of every file icon. Story 16, we could not listen to music with guitars in it. I will never forget the day my brother was listening to Sabbath and my father took the radio and threw it through the window. Spent my childhood listening to Richard Marx and Michael Bolton. Thanks, Dad, my father was very, very strict. I wasn't allowed to have alone time with my mother. He beat the out of me constantly. But the oddest thing that still bugs me to this day is that he would burn all my things as punishment. And I get it, seeing my toys and valuables burning sucked, and I probably learned some lessons, but he not only burned toys, he would burn everything. Every year or so for school, we would go to Meijer and buy me new school clothes and shoes. He would also burn those, like sometimes days after he bought them. At 8 years old, I remember thinking, you now have to buy me more clothes, but that wasn't the point, I suppose. He once took me to the Palace of Auburn Hills in Detroit to see the Globetrotters one year, and during the night, he bought me a Globetrotters basketball and jersey. We had a fun night. The very next day, I had left something on the floor in my room, and his punishment, among other things, was to burn the basketball and jersey he bought for like $150 less than 24 hours earlier. It just never made sense to me. My friends would joke about it all throughout middle and high school. Story 17, oh God. I wasn't allowed to go out like ever. If I was going to hang out with someone, it had to be on the weekend plan at least a week ahead, and my parents had to meet their parents and drive me there. They would come get me before the sun went down. Not a rule. But if I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night or was reading because I couldn't sleep, my mom would come screaming up the stairs, "Why are you up?" and sometimes hit me. I wasn't allowed to close the door in my room. There's more, but that's what I can think of right now. Mostly my mother would just yell about everything. Story 18, 30 minutes of internet time a day, and 99 of the time, that was supervised, as in Mom, looking over my shoulder and commenting on conversations. We had web TV RIP. When they weren't home, they would literally lock the keyboard in a toolbox, my sis, and I could never have friends stay over because the house is a mess. No amount of cleaning satisfied Mom, because the real reason was she wanted to be able to fight with my dad at will. Story 19, my mom was very strict about the ratings of movies and video games. One year for Christmas, a relative gave me a copy of Star Wars Shadows of the Empire for the Nintendo 64. It was AT for teen-rated game, and I wouldn't be turning 13 for another 4 weeks. My mom had my dad drive me to Toys R Us to return the game. We walked into the store and over to the games, and he had me pick out an E for every one-rated game. We proceeded to check out, and as we went to the car, he handed me not only the new game, but the game we were supposed to have returned to buy it as well, and told me not to let her catch me playing it. Story 20, even if I'm wrong, am right. This caused a lot of confusion on my part and rage on theirs. I got my head knocked through a cabinet door for eating a grape wrong, and even more trouble when I cried. Edit, thanks dude for the gold. I cheesed too dang hard. In short, yes, I still see my parents regularly. I'm at their house with my daughter. Yes, I've always known they were kind of off in the brain. I've learned to take no, though. My husband has been there since we were 16, and I attribute my take no shitness to him. Story 21, we couldn't go sledding during the winter or any other season, obviously, because my mom was a neat freak and didn't want snow slogged into the garage. So, no snow playing of any kind. Really never built a snowman. Did go sledding when I was an adult. It's pretty great. All of our clothes in our closet had to be arranged by color, descending in order by shade. So, for example, midnight blue at one end of the blue section and Tar Heel blue at the other. There was a system in place for colors, too. So if the yellows were by the purples, for example, there'd be to pay no shoes on in the house under any circumstances. Was super uncomfortable when my brother's friend, who had prosthetic legs and always had shoes on, came over and didn't take his shoes off. Mom got really mad and confronted him. No Legos or puzzles allowed, as they make messes and look like disorder. I love puzzles as an adult, one of my favorite hobbies. Story 22, I was not allowed to wear makeup or shave until 16. My mom was controlling about food. Everything was kept track of. I had to be in marching band in order to get my permit. I had a job. But even if I worked second shift, which I did, and came home 11, I would have to clear the plates from the table for the dinner that they ate. If I asked to hang out with a friend in the presence of said friend, the answer was automatically no. I was only allowed to do things if the friend or their parent was paying for it. The straw that broke the camel's back and ultimately made me move out at 16 was that I had to live like a boarder. Showers cost $5, a load of laundry was $1.00 for washer, $1.00 for dryer. Telephone time cost $25 per minute. Story 23, I had a friend who wasn't allowed to say the word stupid and tried to report me to the teacher when I said it. Teacher yelled at me and then told me it was okay in private and not to say it around that one kid. Nice guy, though, just had a helicopter mom. Edit, thanks for all the support. For anyone who thinks I'm shitting on the guy, let me remind you he was a very close friend. I eventually caught on to the concept of a helicopter mom thanks to this kid. So I just rolled with all the weird things his mom made him do. I also remember he would complain about the school lunch because it was too unhealthy. Story 24, my stepmom decided that I was using too much shampoo. She would get a little medicine cup before my shower and pour the designated amount into it. It wasn't ever enough because I had hair down to my butt. I also wasn't allowed to use conditioner. Screw her. Story 25, my wife's parents are still strict, and it's annoying whenever we visit. You're not allowed to sleep in even if you're off work, and you can't lounge around in your PJs and have to be fully dressed in the morning again, even if you don't work. Doesn't make sense. Edit, the majority of people replying have been asking why we put up with it. Well, we barely stay over. It's usually just holidays, so it's not like it's all the time. It was more prevalent when my wife still lived there when we first met. We just go along with it to stay on the good side, as they help us out when we need it. A friend of mine wasn't allowed to wear shorts to school unless it was already over 80 degrees when she had to leave. School started at 7:40 a.m., so this almost never happened even on days when it reached over 90 midday. The school didn't have air conditioning. Story 26, if my father yelled up the stairs to me, I wasn't allowed to yell back what. Instead, I would have to come down the stairs to see what he wanted, even if it was just to tell me something or ask a question. Story 27, well, I pretty much couldn't do anything at all. I wasn't even allowed to put posters on my wall. I'm not sure whether it was to protect the wall or some other silly reason. All I wanted to put up was a cute poster of Cuddly's seal, so I ended up sticking it behind my door. My dad once told me that he was going to ground me due to my poor performance in school. So I simply responded with, go ahead, ground me. It's not like I go anywhere anyway. His dead silence after that was an acknowledgement that he knew I had a point there. My radio was taken away during exams because I had to concentrate. The radio helped me concentrate. Story 28, not my parents, but my high school friend had very strict parents. This was shortly after 9/11 and the anthrax scare. It was Halloween evening, and a group of us were supposed to head out and light fireworks around the neighborhood. Well, my friend wasn't allowed to come out that night because his mom was worried about terrorists bombing our city with anthrax. We live in Canada. Story 29, no TV or rock music. Both were of the devil. I did watch some TV when at a friend's house, and I mostly listened to the music I liked, but I did miss out on some TV series that my friends talked about. Story 30, I was from a large family, and discipline was very strict. If myself or one of my siblings broke one of the major rules, my parents would hold a truth session. All the children would be brought to my dad's study where the guilty party would be given an opportunity to confess. If nobody came forward, we would be hit in turn in order of ascending age. The eldest four were hit with a sewer rod while in deference to their age. The youngest ones would get of a bamboo stick. A sewer rod is basically a 4-foot-long flexible rubber rod. Around an inch thick and with a metal cap, it would leave the most remarkable welts. Horrendous things, really. Anyway, this would continue until someone admitted their guilt. At that point, they would receive the blows that everyone else had received to that point. So that was awful. I fully acknowledge that. I'm under no illusions. However, that wasn't the actual unreasonableness. No, the unreasonable part was that the person who caused the truth session didn't always receive the accrued punishment owed for having their siblings beaten. Sometimes they could just be let go, making their siblings hate them for causing pain to them. There'd be no explanation. The study door would be open and would all be told to leave. That meant you could be rewarded for holding out and avoiding the punishment you'd definitely get if you admitted it at the beginning. My parents now tell fun stories about how, when I was a child and I'd done something wrong. I'd always begin with, "Let me tell you my story." Haha, they chortle at my childish phrasing, while I recall the terror that such an approach was meant to stave off. Story 31. My mom's curfew was 7 p.m. and her brother's was 12 a.m. Her brother was about 2 years younger than her, and my granddaddy's logic was that girls get themselves into more trouble than boys. My poor mother only ever attended church functions for fun until she graduated from high school. Story 32. Individuality was almost a cardinal sin in my parents' house. You are what they like, you eat what they like, you do what they like. You do not under any circumstances act like a human being with hopes, dreams, and opinions. Story 33. Not my parents, but I had a friend who got it pretty bad. If you want to play for 1 hour, you have to also practice piano for 1 hour. These and other such rules were posted on his bedroom door. Story 34. Was only allowed 45 minutes of computer time daily. If anything happened to the computer, it was the video game's fault, not the shady links my mom still clicks on 14 years later. I'm getting a lot of cool responses, but I can understand where my parents were coming from. I'm originally from Poland, which, as a lot of people know, was a communist country for a while. Everything was heavily regulated for quite some time. Even after 91, the practices were still coming up until 2003, at least in the area I'm from. So I got a chance to experience mild communism, though I was a bit young to grasp politics. Coming to the U.S., they felt they had to regulate everything in the household, just because that's how it was since they were born. Since then, they've really cut back, and for the most part, they're pretty relaxed about everything. I feel like I got the short end of the stick. Growing up, I wasn't allowed to hang out outside of school even during high school, and in high school I wasn't allowed to date, so my social experience was pretty pathetic to say the least. After graduating, my parents saw no real threat from letting people hang out or date, so my brother got a smooth ride through high school. It's better now, although I still have issues meeting new people. I've kept a small circle of 2 to 3 friends that I talk to, but hopefully that changes next year if I move into NYC for school. At least I still have RuneScape. Story 35. Lots, but the most annoying one was 1 hour of electronics a day. My parents always used to take away the cords to the machine when they would leave the house, and so one time my dad went to rip out the cords like usual, but he ended up taking the Wii cords instead of the PlayStation. I was in awe that he couldn't make the distinction between the device that was black, lit up, and making noise, and the idle white machine. Story 36. I have a ton. One was that I had to always give 24 hours notice if I wasn't going to be home for dinner any night of the week because, dinner plans are never made the day of. This lasted until I moved out when I was 19. I thought that would get better, but it actually became worse. My sister and I go to dinner to our parents every Sunday, and now they need 72 hours notice if we're not going to be there. Also had 10 p.m. curfew every day of the week until I moved out. Sleeping in was never a thing. 9 a.m. wake-up call otherwise. Parents had sensors on our doors, so they could tell if we left our rooms in the night. Cameras covering every inch of outside. We weren't allowed to use the bathrooms after midnight. My stepmother came storming out of her room one night when I went to the bathroom at 2:30 a.m. because, sometimes you wake up and need to go, and I was sick of peeing in a bottle because of their rule. She stormed out and confronted me and looked like she was about to hit me. I said, "I dare you," as I was ready to hit her back. So many. Spelling edit 2 at one point. They cut off power to our rooms at 10 o'clock p.m. every single night. This lasted less than a month, but still happened. Story 37. I had to write essays on TV shows that I wanted to watch. In order to have them unblocked by the parental controls, I remember writing a riveting piece on the educational and cultural benefit of Disney's That's So Raven. Also, I wasn't allowed to watch PG-13 movies, even after turning 13. Wasn't allowed to rest my head on my hand with my elbow on any table while there was also food on that table. If my parents found out I was going too fast in my car small town, so other parents would snitch on me pretty regularly for going 10 over. I had to pay my parents speeding tickets. Also, they would make me pay for the whole family's phone bill if I texted a boy. By the time I moved out at 17, I had given them well over $1,000 in punishment money earned at the Sonic drive-in. Story 38 in the 1970s. My extremely conservative Mormon mother would take the masks from out grocery store plastic Halloween costumes, those wretched ones with the thin elastic string to hold them on, and widen the eye holes with scissors as much as she could without destroying the mask. When we asked why this was necessary, she informed us that in our church, we don't like masks because it was a group of masked men who murdered Brother Joseph Smith. So we want to be able to see your face clearly enough, even with your Halloween masks on. Totally pointless and ineffectual dogmatism, except that whatever that is was never any kind of LDS dogma. Story 39. No matter how right you are, even if they're just flat out wrong, they're always going to be correct, just because they're your parents' source Filipino parents. Story 40. I'm sure plenty of you can relate no sleepovers, no matter what age you are, and if you want to hang out where, when, what time, with whom, why, what will you do, what trade their phone numbers, dad's numbers, mom's numbers, how long names, are they good kids, how do I know them, what are their grades, do they get in trouble often, what type of parents do they have? Story 41. I think it was when I came home for summer break during university, and they tried to reimpose their 11 p.m. curfew. That was the last summer. Edit, thanks for being nitpicky, that was pretty amateur, haha. Story 42. When I think back on it, there weren't really any unreasonable standing rules. More like every now and then my parents would explode on something minor to make up for the lack of parenting. I love my parents, but they don't seem to get the idea that not being around much their kids up a bit. I was extremely shy and withdrawn, and my brother is a narcissist. It would take quite a few paragraphs to explain, but suffice to say their lack of checks and balances on him, and my family's doting on him legitimized his belief that everything revolves around him. On the other hand, nobody paid attention to me, which is partially on me. I'm quite happy to fade into the background in any situation. I hate attention, maybe because I didn't get any when I was young, and when I did it felt weird. I don't really know, but yeah, I specifically remember the few times where my dad was shouting in anger at me, and neither made any sense. Once he told us during the middle of summer, when we were about 13 and 15, not to go outside while he was out. Mind you, we were 13 and 15, and literally every single day during the summer, no one was home, and we were outside unsupervised all day. So my brother was like, rules don't apply to me, and goes outside. Dad came home, starts screaming at him, then starts getting pissed at me and whacks me for not stopping him. At the time, dude was like twice my size, and no one could tell him. So another time on my birthday, all I wanted was a remote control car, so I got one. Brother proceeds to take it out while not there, tries to control it and ride a bike at the same time, runs it over and breaks it, puts it back, doesn't tell anyone. I find it, get pissed. Dad, of course, thinks I'm lying to cover my own. I get whacked a bit. Brother thought it was funny. Instead of parenting, Dad went the easy route, assigned blame and punishment, went back to doing whatever it was he was doing. Fast forward 20 years. Brother is rapidly heading for a divorce that he just can't believe is his fault. Haven't said a word to him in maybe 3 years. Honestly lost track. I can't talk to him because he'll blame random bad that happened to him on something I or my best friend did like 25 years ago. Dad is disabled, lays around all day, can't understand why no one comes to visit. Mom, love her to death, but she's an idiot, makes excuses for both of them. I used to idolize my father, and I glossed over a lot. Been thinking a lot about him lately, and coming to terms with the fact that he's much like my brother, which sucks, but the truth is the best policy. TLDR, the lack of consistent rules was, for me anyway, worse than a strict environment. Long list. Dad is a Baptist preacher. A few of the ones I hated most could only listen to gospel music. No country, rap, pop, etc. No Harry Potter. Witchcraft is of the devil. No staying at friends' houses on Saturdays. Church was on Sunday. No long hair or spiky hair. No spring break trips. Even after I moved out, I had to endure advice and lectures about how going on these trips hurt my testimony. We weren't even drinking, just wanted to go to the beach. Story 43, where do I start? Pretty sure my dad was a psychopath. There were unwritten rules with him that had make up on the spot. So my siblings and I never messed with him. I didn't ask him for anything ever because you wouldn't get it, and he'd beat the out of you for daring to ask him. That meant no school trips, no gifts, no birthdays, basically none of the stuff other kids had. Story 44, I weighs 'em, not allowed to do the following: use the washing machine, wash the dishes, pull the weeds, vacuum outside of my room. I must ask to use the vacuum. I can't cook a meal. I can't have the remote. I get instructed on how to use the microwave that I've been using for years. And if I ask where we're going, I get told out, and I have to dress in jeans, a shirt, and running shoes no matter how hot, because he doesn't like shorts, and no jacket no matter how cold. Story 45, I was interested in learning about Wicca because I was young and in high school, early 2000s, when Harry Potter was still happening and all that stuff. My mom and stepdad found out by reading an email I sent to my cousin. It was the summer, and they freaked out, took everything. I couldn't read, I couldn't listen to music, I couldn't watch TV or movies with the family, I couldn't hang out with friends, couldn't talk to my cousin anymore. Basically, anything that might bring me pleasure was taken. They made me do chores all day, would go on family outings without me. Soon I became a shell of a person. I was going to kill myself. I just was scared of death, so I decided not to go through with it. So I turned myself off. They hated it. They weren't getting a rise out of me anymore. Anything they said to me, to extending my sentence, I wouldn't react to. Since their narcissism relied on a victim, I wasn't a source anymore. So they extended my grounding even further. They could have told me to go pick up dog in the backyard with my teeth, and I wouldn't have flinched. My stepdad's family, just as terrible, would come over and belittle me as well. I was told to smile. So I humor then and flash an empty smile for a second and return to my blank expression. I had to find solace in all this to save me from going to the only thing that saved me that summer was my visitation with my dad. My mom and stepdad tried to paint him in a bad light, like HR was the abusive one. Even as a kid, I knew my dad didn't make me feel as bad and empty as they did. I eventually got through it. Years later, about 4 years ago now, I ended up working at a job unexpectedly with a girl I used to play with in the neighborhood. I always wondered why she stopped showing up. When I wasn't home or in another part of the house, she came to the door and asked to play. One of my parents opened the door and told her I didn't want to play with her anymore. I always wondered why she never hung out with me or talked to me. Even finding this out in a more recent term, I cried and apologized to her. I could have had a great friendship with a lot of people, but they just wanted to alienate and control me. Unfortunately, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't talk to them anymore, but I still live in the same city as them, and I have a lot of social anxiety. Because of that, one of my roommates exhibits some of the behavior my parents were so kind as to bestow on me. It's making things difficult to handle. I just want people to be happy and live in a healthy environment. It's so up that the biggest monsters in the world are the people closest to you. Edit thank you kind stranger for the gold. Story 46, this one was the most ridiculous. I wasn't allowed to leave the coffee pot out. My mother had a really nice espresso machine that I could never master the art of using. So we had an ancient Mr. coffee machine that I would use. My mother would get super irritated if I left the machine on the counter after I was done using it. My best friends can remember plenty of times my mother would do that whisper, yell Trick Labile 87, what is that coffee pot doing out? When she was actually so pissed about the coffee pot being left out, she grounded me for a week. The kicker to the whole thing was once I moved out, I came home to visit, and there's my mom's nice espresso machine and a brand new Mr. coffee on the kitchen counter. I turned to my mother, what is that doing on the counter? My mom, oh, your dad bought a new Mr. coffee, and it's not nearly as ugly the old one. Her whole reason for getting pissed off for years was because the old one was ugly. Story 47, when I was in 5th grade, I wrote some stuff in my diary about masturbating, and like a month later, my mom went through all my stuff. She would randomly go in my room, tear it apart. I'd always get in trouble for something, and then I'd have to clean up the mess and be grounded for whatever amount she felt like that day. So anyway, she found that diary entry. She picks me up from school and wants to talk to me. I get home. My door was removed from my room. That diary entry was taped on the wall. And I was threatened with a belt if I didn't answer all her invasive questions up. I can't be the only one who feels like if I had some of these parents described in the comments, I would have turned out to be a murderer. Some of the stories seem more like abuse than anything else. Just reading the comments got me all angry. Story 48, my mom makes me and my siblings pray, even though she never prays. It's messed up. She cooks and cleans, but a lot of her day is spent backbiting about people on the phone with my auntie. Why should we be devout Muslims when you don't follow the 5 pillars and you commit sin on a daily basis? And when I pointed out, in the one who needs to shut up, total BS. The worst human beings are the ones who aren't self-aware. My mother is the worst human being I have ever met. She plays the victim, so she can find a perpetrator. All my parents have taught me is how I shouldn't conduct myself. That's the only bright side to this. Story 49, I was called at a friend's house at 11 p.m. at night because I left 2 t-shirts slung over the chair in my room versus hanging them in my closet. I had to go back to my house, and then I was grounded for a week upon getting home. My mother had gone through my entire room and tossed every item out of my dresser. She claimed they were messily put in the dresser. Fun stuff.